Hi, this is needlepointers.com. Today I'd like to show you how to make this fun kid scarf from loop yarn. This loop yarn that I found at Joann was on sale, well actually on clearance, for $2.47 a skein, and it's the Crayola off the hook yarn. So I don't know if they still carry this yarn in Joann since this is on clearance, but you can still find this yarn on Amazon, and there might be new colors maybe that came out, and that's why they had this on clearance, so they might still even have it at Joann. But it comes in all these fabulous Crayola type colors, which are fun colors for kids. And even these two are multicolor in one skein. And they make some really pretty scarves. As you see here, there's two scarves that I made with the loop yarn. This is a great way to get kids into knitting because it's finger knitting and they don't need to have needles, knitting needles to do this. You just knit with your fingers, and it can show the basics of knitting and get them interested in knitting. Kids could make this project in about an hour, so it's a fun, quick project that they can make for themselves. If you'd like to see a full photo tutorial of this project, please click the iCard or the link in the description of this video to visit our website, needlepointers.com. Also, near the end of the tutorial page, we will have links of where you can buy this Crayola off the hook yarn. Another yarn that would be really good for this project is also the Red Heart brand Loop It finger looping yarn. This skein of yarn is about the same texture, and it's around the same size as this Lion brand loop yarn. The Lion brand is 3 ounces, and this Loop It Red Heart yarn is 3.5 ounces. So either one of these types of yarn would be perfect for this project depending on the colors that you would like to make. Remember that if you purchase yarn through the links on our website, this helps us to keep making more videos because we get a small commission on the sale of the yarn. The yarn does not cost any more to you, it's just they give us a small commission for referring you to this site. So we really appreciate any purchases that you make through our links. So one thing I want to say about loop yarn is that it's similar to regular knitting in that if you do try to do the same stitch across the entire project like this one, if this is all using the stocking stitch and it's the same, you can see it's the same. This one, you can see there's an alternating pattern in here, and the alternating pattern is very important because as you can see, this scarf is curling up onto itself. Now if that's the look that you want in your scarf, that's fine, and you can use the one type of stitch across the whole thing, and then it will curl up like this. But if you want your scarf to lay flat, you need to alternate with the stocking stitch and the garter stitch at least every few rows. So on this one, I alternated with the stocking stitch about every 3 rows. Or I did 3 rows of stocking and 1 row of garter. On this one, I did two rows of stocking and then a garter. A finished scarf with this loop yarn will measure about 38 inches long. For this loop yarn scarf, I had done 2 stocking stitches and then a garter stitch. For this one, I did 3 stocking stitches, then a garter stitch. So for this one, this sample, I'm going to do 4 stocking stitches and then a garter stitch, just to show that kind of pattern. To start your scarf, count out 8 loops. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So here's my 8th loop. This is called my working yarn. To start, we will do the stocking stitch. We'll take the next loop in the working yarn from back to front through the previous loop in the yarn. Then take the next loop in the working yarn and stitch through the next loop in your starting chain. And keep doing that all the way across, inserting each loop from the back to the front through the previous loop, in the loop in the previous row. Okay. I suggest that after each row or every couple rows you count to make sure that you didn't drop a loop or add an extra or miss one of the loops. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You can also look on the back and make sure that there's not an extra loop back there. So for this pattern, we'll do 4 of the stocking stitch, 4 rows of the stocking stitch across, and then we'll switch to the garter stitch. So the next row is another row of stocking stitches, and we go the same way as last time, taking each loop from the working yarn and stitching through from back to front in each of the loops of the previous row. And after each row I like to make sure I've pulled them all and have them lined up so they're nice and even, and not makes it easier so that you don't end up dropping a loop along the way. Okay, so that's row 3. So we're going to do one more row of stocking stitches before we switch. Okay, still have 8 loops here, and I have 1, 2, 3, 4 rows of stocking stitch. Next row will be a garter stitch. To do the garter stitch, it's just as easy as the stocking stitch. We take our working yarn, take the next loop in the working yarn, and insert it from front to back this time, through the loop in the previous row. So the stocking stitch is back to front through this way, and garter stitch is from front to back. And here I skipped a loop by mistake, so I just take that out and put it back in, put the other loop in. If you found you missed a loop, or you have skipped a loop in your working yarn, or you missed looping in one of your loops in your previous row, you can always just take the loops out and restitch. So there's the row of garter, and that's what the back looks like so far. So next in the pattern, we're going to go back to the stocking stitch again. Now you could do 2 rows of garter if you want, and then another 4 rows or 3 rows of the stocking stitch. It's you can do pretty much most any variation that you want in the pattern, except for doing all of either stocking or all of garter stitches. You need to alternate every once in a while or you'll get that curling. So there's another row of stocking stitch. I'll do 3 more rows of the stocking stitch before I do another row of garter. Okay, so now I have, this is the garter stitch finished. 1, 2, 3, and 4. 4 rows. And I'll switch back to the garter stitch here. And that's all there is to it to make a scarf from this loop yarn. You just keep going back and forth in your pattern until you use up the whole skein, or just about the whole skein of yarn. So there you go. So next I'll just go back to the four more rows of the stocking, garter, stocking, garter. And you can see even with 4 rows in between, 4 rows and then 1 row of garter, it doesn't really curl like that one that's all stocking. Once you've stitched your entire scarf and you're at the end of the skein, you might wonder, how do I finish this off? Well, we finish this off with what's called a bind off, and it's just as easy to do as the rest of the stitches. So what you do is you finish a row, and then starting from the opposite side of where your skein is, you take the first two loops in the row. Take the second loop and pass it through the first loop and pull like that. And then take the third loop, pass it through the second loop and pull. Take the next loop, pass it through, and just continue that across the row for all 8 loops. So there's the bound off, and you can see it's nicely finished on the edge. Next, you can cut open this loop carefully so that you don't actually cut the actual yarn. And then you can cut off the yarn. Just make a little knot using the tail of the yarn, and then weave this yarn in along the row like that. So that finishes off your loop yarn scarf. I hope you enjoyed learning how to make this loop yarn kids scarf, and have your kids make some scarves for themselves for this winter. This is a fun project for kids to make. We did this with one of our 4-H clubs last year, and the kids were between the ages of 8 and 12 years old, and they all had fun making these loop yarn scarves out of this Crayola off the hook yarn. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel by clicking the subscribe link. Visit our website, needlepointers.com, for lots of other loop yarn crafts, and don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter to keep up with all our new projects.